What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel, and it's time to give you my official prediction for the 2023 ACC Football Championship game between the Louisville Cardinals and the Florida State Seminoles. So it's time for my game preview / game prediction for this ACC Championship game. We're going to also do other Power 5 conferences throughout this week. We're going to start with the ACC first, and then, of course, we're going to do the Big Ten tomorrow. Wednesday will be the Big 12 Championship, and then on Thursday is the Pac-12, and then we're going to end things out with the SEC on Friday. So we got a lot of conference championship games to predict this week. So we're going to start here with Louisville and Florida State here in the ACC Championship. Going to give you a game preview / game prediction on this game. Going to go through the stat comparisons here between these two teams and also give you the game summary, what time the game is this upcoming weekend, and also see who the favorite going into the game is as well. And then also we're going to give you the previous game result matchups here for both of these teams throughout their 2023 season. And then, of course, we'll give you the prediction at the end of this video and see how the game's going to go down. So let's get right into it here with my ACC Championship game prediction here between Louisville and Florida State. So we'll start with the stat comparisons here between these two teams. We'll start with Louisville first. They're coming in with a record of 10-2. This team is averaging about 33 points per game, so that's a pretty decent number for this Louisville offense. Offensively, total yards per game for this Louisville team, 439.8 yards per total yards this year for this Louisville team. I feel like this offense is a lot better than it was kind of compared to last year. They definitely have like a really good running backs and everything. They also got a really good quarterback in Plummer. And speaking of Plummer, passing yards per game for this Louisville team, about 255.1 yards per passing. Plummer on the season's thrown 21 touchdown passes and 11 interceptions. So he's been up and down as a quarterback, but he does have experience. He's about 2,952 yards on the season as well. So he might reach that 3,000-yard mark, by this weekend coming up here in the conference championship game. And then you look at the rushing yards number for Louisville, about 184.7 yards per rushing. So this is a pretty good Louisville running game. They got Jawar Jordan, one of their top running backs in the backfield. He's got about 1,076 yards on the ground this year and about 13 rushing touchdowns. So, yeah, he's been having a really good season for this Louisville team. And then offensively and defensively in the rankings here for Louisville, they are 26 on offense, and then defensively they're 19th in the country. So Louisville overall pretty good on both sides of the football. They're at least a top 30 offense and at least a top 20 defense. So those are the stats there for the Louisville Cardinals. And then looking at Florida State, they're coming in with a record of 12-0. This team's averaging about 38.8 points per game, so that's a really good number for this Florida State offense. Total yards per game for Florida State, about 432.7 yards per total yards. So, yeah, this is a really good explosive offense that Florida State has on the offensive side of the football. Passing yards per game for Florida State, about 276.4 yards per passing. Obviously, Jordan Travis leads the, Seminoles in passing yards, but he, of course, is out for the rest of the year. He was injured in that North Alabama game, and then obviously will be out for the rest of the year. So the passing yards are probably going to drop here for Florida State. When you look at the rushing yards number for Florida State, about 156.3 yards per rushing. So they're a pretty decent running game. You look at Trey Benson, obviously, about 838 yards on the ground this year and about 14 rushing touchdowns. So both running backs for Louisville and Florida State are both really big, impactful players on the running game for both of these teams. And then offensively and defensively in the rankings for the Seminoles, they're 31st on offense, and then defensively they're 20th on defense. So both of these teams are pretty similar on both sides of the football, offensively and defensively in the rankings. Obviously, Florida State is really good on both sides of the football from there. But looking at the stat comparisons here between these two teams, stat comparisons and everything, Louisville definitely has the advantage in the total yards per game, but only by like a little bit of a margin. That really surprises me there, that Louisville has the advantage over the Seminoles in the stats and everything. Passing yards per game, Florida State has the advantage there, and then Louisville has the advantage in the running game. But again, what really surprises me here about the numbers is that offensively and defensively in the rankings, Louisville has the advantage over the Seminoles in both sides of the football. So these are the stat comparisons here between these two teams for their 2023 seasons. So let's now get to the game summary here for this game coming up this weekend. So you got Louisville and Florida State here. This game's going to be at 8 o'clock Eastern time on ABC. The game will be at Charlotte, North Carolina, like where the ACC Championship game is held every year. Florida State, as of right now, is the favorite by 3 points in this one, so by about a field goal. And looking at the over and under, it's at 51.5, so they're kind of predicting this game to be a low-scoring type game. And finally, we're going to see Louisville and Florida State face each other. You know, they did not play each other in the regular season due to all the, being no divisions in the ACC and everything. So we're finally going to be able to see both of these teams go head-to-head here in the conference championship game. Louisville comes in at 10-2, a loss to Kentucky this past weekend, a very tough loss for them. And then Florida State comes in after a really close call against Florida this past weekend as well. So both of these teams had pretty tough games, this past weekend against two SEC teams that are pretty average, on their 2023 seasons and everything. But again, this game's at 8 o'clock Eastern time on ABC. And looking at the FBI, the matchup predictor here for this game, the FBI favors Florida State by a big margin. This one, about 74.4% of a chance to beat Louisville here in the ACC title game. And then for Louisville, it's just about 25.6%. So even though Florida State has a backup quarterback going into this game with no Jordan Travis, they're really a big favorite, of course, by the FBI. But the spread number is about 3 points. So I could see the reason why the number is really low for this game. I think it was at 6 points last week, and maybe like a couple weeks ago it was probably at 9. But with that number being close now, it's obviously because, Jordan Travis is out for the rest of the year. Obviously, that gives the advantage to Louisville and everything, but I still think this is going to be a very tough game. I think both of these teams, they definitely overlooked their opponents from this past weekend. Louisville definitely overlooked Kentucky this past weekend, and Florida State definitely overlooked their rival Florida as well. So both of these teams definitely overlooked, their opponents from this past weekend. They were definitely overlooking, to the ACC championship and everything. And I think that's the reason why Louisville lost to Kentucky, and that's the reason why Florida State was kind of sluggish against Florida as well. Plus, it was on the road for Florida State, but also they had a backup quarterback in this game that doesn't really play much. So again, Florida State has to rely on a backup quarterback in this game. And then for Louisville, they're just going to have to redeem themselves after a really tough loss to a Kentucky team that's pretty average. But again, this game's at 8 o'clock Eastern time on ABC. And again, the Seminoles are favored by a field goal in this one at 3 points. And again, they're predicting this one to be a low-scoring type game at 51.5, which I very well could see it playing out that way. So this is the game summary here for this ACC championship game between Louisville and Florida State. Here are the previous matchups here for both of these teams. Looking at Louisville first, they're coming in with a record of 10-2. Their other loss came to Pittsburgh, of course, earlier in the year. So that was their second loss there on the season. Then you look at their previous matchups here. They defeated the Duke Blue Devils October the 28th, 23-0. So they shut them out in that game. And then you look at that Virginia Tech game. They won that one 34-3 on November the 4th. They defeated Virginia November the 9th on that Thursday night game, 31-24. That was a really close call there for this Louisville team. But you look at that game against Miami, they won that game 38-31 on November 18th on the road. And then they lost to their rival Kentucky on November 25th, 38-31 this past weekend. That was a very tough loss for them, but it was a really good game to watch between these two rivals and everything. So again, the two losses that Louisville has this year are definitely the Pittsburgh game, in the month of October. And then, they also lost to Kentucky here. So those are the only two losses that Louisville has this year. And then for Florida State, they're coming in with a record of 12-0, meant to put a 12 there instead of like 11-0. They defeated Wake Forest on the road on October 28th, 41-16, a very solid win for them on that game. They defeated Pittsburgh on the road on November the 4th, 24-7. Defeated Miami, their rival here, November 11th on like I said, November the 11th, 27-20. They defeated North Alabama 58-15. 58-15 on November 18th. That was the game where, Jordan Travis went down with an injury and everything. So Florida State was able to pull away from that North Alabama game, even though getting off to a really slow start in that game. They were down like 13-0, I believe, like in the second quarter. And then they defeated rival Florida on the road 24-15 this past weekend. Florida State kind of had a pretty tough game there in the first half, but it looks like second half defensively they came out really strong in that second half. So Game result matchups here for both of these teams. If you compare them, obviously Louisville has 2 losses, of course, to like really average teams. Pittsburgh was one of the worst teams in the ACC this year. That was definitely a very unexpected loss for this Louisville team, and a very unacceptable loss for this Louisville team as well. And then obviously that Kentucky game, that Kentucky team is pretty average. So again, that was a very tough loss for this Louisville team this past weekend. And like I said, I think Louisville definitely overlooked, Kentucky this weekend because they were looking ahead to Florida State this week. And then for Florida State, again, Jordan Travis went down with an injury there on November 18th, but they were still able to pull away in that game 58-15. But again, that Florida game was a pretty tough one. I think Florida State's had the more impressive wins. I know with Jordan Travis not in there, it's definitely really tough without him. But, when Jordan Travis was in there, I believe Florida State has had the more better wins than Louisville. I mean, obviously, Louisville has been definitely a big surprise team this year. But compared to, Florida State and everything, Florida State has just been a more dominant team than Louisville. So, again, these are the game results here. Previous 5 game results here between these two teams. Let's now get into the prediction here for this game coming up this weekend. So again, we got Louisville and Florida State here for the ACC championship. Again, Louisville comes in with a record of 10-2. Florida State comes in with a record of 12-0. So both of these teams, I think, are pretty even. I think Florida State has the more experienced team. Louisville has obviously those transfers that came in over course in the offseason. Florida State, though, they're kind of, out for redemption here. Obviously, after having a tough game, of course, to Florida, I think, like I said, both of these teams were looking ahead of each other, over the course of the weekend, and they were not focused on their rivals. But now they're focused on each other. They finally get their hands on each other this weekend. And again, these two teams did not play in the regular season, so we don't really know how this game's going to go down. But how I think the game's going to go down here, I think it's going to be a really close game here between these two teams. But, Florida State, again, with a backup quarterback in this one. Louisville, obviously, with the more experience of a roster now, it seems like. But, Florida State, I do trust their running game a little bit more. I also trust their defense a little bit more to make some stops. I think Florida State's going to get off to a really slow start in this game. Maybe the first half, Louisville is up by at least by 3 or 7 points in this one. But again, I think in the second half, kind of similar to the Florida game, I think Florida State's going to end up playing really good defense. And I think it comes down to like a one-possession type game. And I think Florida State does defeat Louisville here to crown themselves the ACC champions. And again, Florida State's been my pick since the preseason to win it all in the ACC. And I'm still sticking with my preseason pick. I was kind of leaning towards Louisville there, but after the loss to Kentucky, I'm kind of leaning towards more Florida State now to win this one. I also think they cover that spread by 3 points. So Florida State wins this one, I think 27-24, and also turnovers can probably change the game here as well. So again, that is my official prediction here for this ACC championship game between Florida State and Louisville. Again, I got Florida State winning this one 27-24 over the Louisville Cardinals here in the ACC championship. Like I said, I think Louisville's up at the half, but then second half Florida State comes out, plays really good offense. They also play really solid defense. They probably force some turnovers on this Louisville team and everything, and I think that's what's going to win them the game. So I got Florida State winning this one 27-24. Again, it's a one-possession type game, between these two teams. So we'll see what happens here in the ACC championship game coming up this weekend. But that is my official prediction for the 2023 ACC championship game between the Louisville Cardinals and the Florida State Seminoles. Again, Florida State, my pick here, 27-24 to crown themselves the ACC champions. Give me your thoughts on the ACC championship game down in the comments below. Give me your prediction as well down in the comments below. And also give me your final score prediction as well. And thank you for watching this video. And stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports channel.